Check 1 2, check, check. Check 1 2. I wish to God you loved this episode as much as I did. Let's do this. What's up, guys? As promised, I'm doing an episode recap for every episode of Season 8 of Game of Thrones. We're going to talk about internet culture a little bit. And I could be wrong. You could be right. It's a wonderful world, isn't it? But first off, on a sad note, my good friend Dylan Clancy, I posted a video yesterday. He passed away. And the reason I mentioned Dylan is because Dylan was the biggest Game of Thrones fan I've ever met. I love Game of Thrones like I can't reach that high because then you won't be able to see the frame. But just imagine Dylan likes it like at least 10 times what I love it, and I love it immensely. So it breaks my heart that Dylan did not get to see this episode. And I will tell you, Dylan loved every episode of this season so far. So that breaks my heart even more. But Dylan, you would have loved this one, brother. But anyway, we're going to talk about this episode, the bells, and I'm going to have to take a drink of my Monster before I get into this. Now, before we dig deep into this episode, let me just say my reaction after watching this, I thought to myself, okay, finally an episode that everybody's going to agree on. There's no way that people aren't going to love this episode as much as I did. This was the most epic episode of television I think I've ever seen in my life. That was my initial reaction after seeing this. As well as my son and my wife. We were all like, oh my God. We literally couldn't even sit still in our seat. It was just that amazing to us. Just on an epic scale, from a production standpoint, from an emotional standpoint. I mean, I was getting like Star Wars Episode 3 vibes at times, you know? And we're going to get into that. But sure enough, I went on social media and I was wrong. Damn internet culture. But yeah, I mean, I would say it's split down the middle again, if not more people disliking this episode. And I tried to understand why in the hell did people dislike this? And I think the biggest reason is because people didn't like the character choices in this movie, I guess from a writer's standpoint. And I think what gets a lot of people into trouble going into these shows is they already have in their mind where they want these characters to end up. I don't work like that at all. Before every episode, I never have a thought as to where I want Dany to end up, where I want Jaime to end up, Cersei. I mean, we can talk around the water cooler about it, and it's fun, but I don't really care. I just want a good story, and I like a good surprise, actually. I like to be surprised by the end of an episode, just because it gives me something great to talk about, you know? Now, if the character reaches a point where it just doesn't make sense because they started in a certain way, then yeah, I completely get that. But I didn't get that with this episode. Not at all. But I will break down my opinions on all the main characters as far as the ones everybody's talking about as I'm doing this review. But first off, we got Tyrion walking up to Dany and basically confessing, I know that you are Jon Snow's aunt. We all know that when Dany is in a mood, she's not to be messed with. And Tyrion knew that his ass was going to be in a sling, but he took the risk and he told her. And she said, where did you find this out? And he basically named Varys. And so the beginning of this episode is Dany taking care of Varys. Varys is going to be burned by Drogon. I love that last line that Varys says. You know, he says, I hope I'm wrong. Because Varys had a bad feeling about Dany. He knew what Dany could become. You know, she is a Targaryen. We know the history of the Targaryen and the Mad King. We know that there's some crazy blood in that family. And I think a lot of people had problems with Dany's reaction at a certain point in this episode when she just completely turns and fucking kills everybody. And people really had an issue with that, I think. I thought it was amazing, actually. I was like, wow, they went there. This is awesome. Because I got those Anakin Skywalker vibes. This is what Anakin did in episode 3. He killed the younglings. She killed the younglings. I ate all that up. I was loving it. So our first death in here, and by the way, we're going to talk about deaths too in this because people were complaining that they killed too many people, whereas in the last episode, people were complaining that not enough people died. Internet culture. So next up, this episode is really setting up for a battle at King's Landing. And I just love the tone and the vibe and the cadence of this, there's just this overwhelming sense of dread throughout this whole episode. You have a feeling that this is not going to end well at all. And I was definitely getting vibes from The Long Night, actually, as far as like the tone goes. You know, at the beginning of that episode, there was this sense of dread. Same thing here. And then that's one thing I'm loving about this last season. You have a feeling that this whole thing is not going to end on a happy ending. And it could, and I could enjoy it. But right now, things are seeming pretty grim. Now, Tyrion I loved in this episode. Tyrion is very worried throughout this whole thing. He cares about the people of King's Landing. He actually does care about his sister. And so he pleads with Dany to, if the bells sound, then pull back. You know, don't fight. You know, if they surrender, don't press forward. And so, you know, that's the question. You know, the question's presented pretty early. And so throughout the whole episode, we're wondering what's going to happen if they do surrender, if those bells do sound. So then, you know, they're in King's Landing and there's just this overwhelming calm throughout the whole thing. And then all of a sudden, out of the clouds comes Drogon. And Drogon just starts burning the shit out of everybody. And of course the bells sounded. You know, they have surrendered. They know they're beaten. I mean, pretty much right away, Winterfell's army is just slaying, kicking ass, thanks to the help of Drogon. The Red Keep, they don't even stand a chance against this army. So we already know early on in this episode that Cersei and them, they can't win. So how do you make that interesting? How do you keep that interesting? And what they do is play with this tension between Cersei and Daenerys. If you remember, the first time Cersei met Daenerys, she hated her. She treated her with so much disrespect from the beginning. And if you remember, Dany, when she went to that meeting when they were all going to talk about the White Walkers, she went there civilly. You know, she wanted to come together as a union and try to beat this, you know, this foe of the White Walkers. But Cersei was never cooperative through the whole thing. You know, she was going to backstab her throughout the whole thing. So Dany's reaction to that, you know, her friend Missandei being beheaded, you know, that pride is really what ended up causing the people of King's Landing to get slaughtered. So really, in a way, this is kind of Cersei's fault. She released the beast. She unleashed the Targaryen in Dany. That's great storytelling if you ask me, guys. I don't know what you guys want out of storytelling, but when you got conflict like that, I just eat that right up. I think I said in one of my reviews, it's like cinematic Kool-Aid. I can't believe I actually said that. I remember Mariana from Impression Blend giving me a hard time about that too, but I'm gonna own it. Also, my favorite character in this season, Arya, she really has one motive in mind. She wants to kill Cersei. And so it's her and the Hound, and they're trying to make their way to Cersei. So there's a point in this thing where the Hound tries to make Arya see reason. You trying to kill her isn't gonna make any difference because we are in serious shit right now. We got a dragon flying around town and he's trying to kill everybody. We need to get the hell out of here. So Arya sees reason and they're getting the hell out of there. But then, of course, we've all been waiting for the big fight between the Hound and the Mountain. When are these two brothers gonna finally meet and fight it out? And it was a good fight, I thought, actually, you know, because how can you fight the Mountain? The Mountain is just this massive beast. But the Hound really, you know, he held his own. And I love that where he freaking takes the knife and puts it right through the freaking Mountain's head. But the way he killed him, I think, was poetic because what's the one thing that the Hound is so afraid of? Fire. And he pretty much takes his own life to kill the Mountain and thrusts him into the fire. Now, the big thing that I think most people really had a problem with was the death of Cersei and Jaime. You know, first off, Jaime, he gets in this fight with Euron because Euron, his whole fleet was just completely obliterated by Drogon. But of course, he makes it out, and then there's this fight between Jaime and Euron. And Jaime is pretty much next to dead, and then luckily he's able to kill Euron. You know, he gets to Cersei, and this is the point in the show where I actually started feeling for Cersei. I actually started feeling scared for her, and I never thought that that would happen because she is really the villain of this show up to a point. To me, that's great storytelling. If you can make me change my mind about a character once, maybe twice, 3 times, which Game of Thrones has done quite a few times with Cersei and Jaime, that's great storytelling. And so it is kind of a beautiful moment, even though it's really creepy because they're brothers and sisters, but it's a beautiful moment when they finally come together And, you know, Jaime pretty much says, we're going to die together. And the question is, are they dead? Because you know how it goes in TV. If they don't actually show them dead, then are they really dead? We all remember the Hound. Don't count Jaime and Cersei out just yet. We might see them again next episode, or at least one of them. We'll see. But my favorite character in this episode by far is Dany. I love her shift. That moment when she's in the sky and you can just see the rage on her face, the confusion on her face, and she's just fed up. She's felt that everyone has been against her, not only in Winterfell, but if you think back to all those other seasons, she's constantly tested. You know, this is a woman that has been through hell. She didn't even really want to be queen when this whole thing started out. And she became this great leader and always just constantly having to prove herself. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But then she ends up in Winterfell and everybody's against her. So I completely buy her actions. Like I said, it's the Anakin Skywalker effect. She turned and she pretty much did the unthinkable. She killed innocent people. And that makes for great drama. So guys, I don't understand what the hell you guys don't like about this episode. I don't mean to be pompous. I know I'm gonna get freaking dislikes on this video, but you know what? That's just how I feel. And I respect how you feel about this episode. If the characters didn't end up the way you wanted them to end up, that's not bad writing necessarily. It might be, but don't call something bad writing if it didn't end up the way you wanted it to end up. To me, that makes no sense. Take this movie right here, Seven, all right? Did I want Gwyneth Paltrow's head to end up in that box? I didn't, because I was really invested in the love between her and David. So it was heartbreaking when her head was in that box. But you know what? It was still really good writing. So anyway, guys, that's my recap for Game of Thrones, The Bells, episode 5. One more episode to go. Just by that preview, it looks amazing. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. This episode, I haven't given any ratings on these episodes, but if I had to give this episode a rating, it's Trapped on an Island. This is probably my favorite episode of the whole freaking series. Probably next to The Red Wedding. There's a top 5 idea. But yeah, this was a fantastic episode. Also, guys, just past 27,000 subscribers. Thank you all so much for taking the time out of your busy days to watch my videos. I really appreciate it. So, post in the comments your thoughts. Also, be sure to come over to Killer Flicks, where we talk horror all day and every day. And on Fridays, we do Free for Fridays. Follow me at Drumdums on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Letterboxd. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching. Have a great day, and Drumdum out.